Hey, Roman, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on as a guest. Thank you for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, well, Peter kind of put me on the spot, right? Yeah.
You did, yeah. He sure did. He sure did. He put you you were already on my list of people to reach out to. It just wasn't kind of, he helped expedite that reach out. So I'm glad he
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I love what you're doing. I listen to your sessions all the time. So I think it's great.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it'd be good to start with a bit of, background, a bit about yourself, for those who don't know about you.
Sure. Yeah. So, Roman Chanclor, I've been, with Siemens, covering our Mendix product line for the past little over 4 years now. I started my career in, more on the defense contractor side back in, the early 2000s. As a business development manager, I've always been in the go-to-market side of the house. But back then we were, digitizing forms that were paper-based and stuff like that. We're talking 20 something years ago. And, fast forward today, now we're actually, I've had experience selling software to, I like to say, selling software to the good guys to catch the bad guys. So I've done
Yeah.
that. I got really excited whenever I had the opportunity to come to Siemens because although I've covered the defense and intelligence community for most of my career, this gave me an opportunity to cover like something that's dear to my heart, which is aerospace. I've been an aerospace junkie my whole life. And so it allowed me to get closer to those companies that even as a little kid, I used to, look up to with my
Yeah.
uncle who was a colonel in the Air Force that used to fly that plane right there,
Nice.
and just now getting to talk to these engineers that build these, systems of air power is just amazing. So I'm thankful every day that I get to wake up and work in this industry.
Yeah, it's great that you touched on, obviously, because I was going to ask and you answered it, was obviously where did that interest come from, right? And now you're every day being able to, work with these businesses and offer them, value to how they can kind of, be better in their software, so something like you said, as a kid, it's, it's added on to your career now that you're
Yeah.
able to just speak to these people and, live a bit of a childhood dream as well.
Yeah, it's listen, whenever you get to actually go stand inside of like a manufacturing facility and you can see, a warplane that's actually being built at the
Yeah.
time. I mean, it brings you back to being a kid again. I can tell you that
Yeah.
right now. I mean, the engineers even that work on these systems still today, they're just as excited to work on them as I am to see them working on them. So, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
That's
a
cool.
very passionate industry, a very
Yeah.
passionate industry.
Yeah, yeah. And the industries that you're focusing on, obviously, they're tied to national missions and public safety, how does that influence the way you sell and how do you approach that?
Yeah, number one, it's you have to have humility going in to the sales process. Being, a go-to-market individual, we come off as very excited. It's very, cheerleaderish. Hey,
Yeah.
here's our product that can do everything, cook you eggs in the morning as well. To whereas they have hard problems to solve. And so like actually doing all of the upfront research to understand like how are you going to add value to this individual that's giving you 30 or 60 minutes on their calendar will get you that next 30 to 60 minutes. You get one shot in this industry really to set an impression, and if they don't see that you're going to add value, you're pushed off, right? Because either you haven't done enough research on their problems. The good thing about this industry is everything is pretty much public. It's
Yeah.
public knowledge, so if you can do your homework, you can actually understand where your technology fits into the much broader landscape of technologies that are being deployed in that customer.
Yeah, that's interesting. And obviously, I think not just these industries, but most industries, obviously, traditional software is the way they know how to do it. It's just the way that it's been done in such a long time. You know, how do you kind of position, Mendix, in these environments, versus, selling traditional software?
It's funny that we're on a low code podcast right now and I sell a low code platform, but I try to veer away from low code, like mentioning that to
Yeah.
my customers, just because it's been given sort of, I don't know whose fault it is, but it's not segmented really well, like
Yeah.
what, enterprise low code is versus no code. And so there's a lot of misconceptions around what a Mendix platform can do versus what your no code platform can do. And once you can get the developers, the full stack programmers, seeing this as a tool that they can actually accelerate development and upskill themselves and work with things that they weren't working with, like Gen AI capabilities and bringing in machine learning models into a low code platform, then you start getting them excited. And that's whenever we see the tipping point happen inside of the organization. Whenever we can not convince them, but partner with them and walk them through a journey to show them, look, this isn't, your child's no code, right?
Yeah.
Or this isn't going to be sold to the administrator of finance to go out and build enterprise applications. Although if they want to learn it, they can, right? But we're a full stack visual model based platform that allows you to develop in low code. But you can drop the high code to create reusable components. You can extend our platform. Those are areas that excites those really full stack programmers to give them an extra tool. We're never going to replace a full stack programmer from being a full stack programmer. But if they know that they have another tool that they can accelerate software development, they tend to will use Mendix. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what unique challenges do you face when, historically, these organizations, they've relied on legacy and bespoke solutions, right? So how do you, when you're introducing low code, what challenges are you facing with these organizations?
Well, number one, the misconception that we just talked about. But whenever we get into actually deployment, the reason why a lot of these organizations are still on legacy based platforms is the InfoSec policies to get new platforms into the environment is so rigid. It's typically not worth the investment up front to bring in a new technology that could be replaced in 2 years. So we spend a lot of time focusing on, look, we're not going anywhere. We've been around for 20 years. We're owned by Siemens. We're adopting the future of where software development's going to be, and we're your partner for the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, however long you want to use our platform. And as soon as we can get them to see this more of a long-term partnership and a short-term investment, that they're going to be able to get that ROI that's needed in the long term, then they see that it's worth the time to bring in their compliance and their InfoSec team to actually understand, okay, how do we actually bring Mendix in to this traditional non-commercial environment? And so that's a really tough, sometimes that takes us 2 years. I'm not going to lie to you. I
Wow.
mean, it's a long sales process.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're kind of speaking to these organizations, obviously, low code is, I think these day and age, most people have heard the term low code, but maybe not specifically know the platforms, right? And you touched on some platform, like they're all in the same quadrant, but they do offer different things, right? And,
Yeah.
some have ceilings, some don't. Do you feel when you're having these conversations, more and more decision makers today are actually aware of the differences, or it's still that they're skeptical, they're still, not sure, they still think that it's for small internal applications, or just not aware of the value?
It's the where we, in my industry specifically, they're just not aware of the value yet, or until we deploy. And so the real power of the platform comes in two folds, any low code platform. Not only the fact that you can build applications faster and typically better because you're getting more feedback from your user community that's actually going to use the application in an agile, true agile manner, but also the end application that's built. Right. That's really what wows the executives is whenever they see that, oh, hold on, it took you guys 6 weeks to build this application and you're pulling in ERP, PLM, and manufacturing execution data. Where's this been? Like that solves a
Yeah.
lot of our problems. Well, we built this using low code. You did what? Like, how does that work? You know what I mean? Like, and so then you start getting the wheels turning and that light bulb moment happens then.
Yeah. Do you feel, in your experience, obviously, Mendix is European founded, right? But Siemens is a global brand, right? Everybody would have heard of Siemens. Do you feel that being tied to Mendix being tied to Siemens when you're having these conversations builds a bit more trust with these organizations, because it's, I'm assuming, maybe more so now that people know about Mendix, but a lot of people would know Siemens versus Mendix.
Yeah, I mean, I ride Siemens shirt tails all the time. I mean, look right here,
Yeah.
Siemens.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
all in. Yeah, I'm all in. Yeah. So the great thing about the partnership and just being owned by Siemens, but it's more of a partnership internally because they
Mm,
have a go-to-market sales team as well that sells all of the big systems,
yeah,
the team centers, the op centers, and stuff like that. The great thing is all of the services folks that implement those technologies, they understand that customer so well and the processes that that customer has and where they need help. And so it's not just training and getting the customer to buy into it, but it's also getting the Siemens team to buy into where Mendix can fit within the overall, environment that they're selling into. And so
yeah,
we get to bring a lot of credibility whenever we walk into the room with our Siemens account orchestrator, because that customer knows that that orchestrator understands their pains and would not be wasting their time to bring in another technology if they didn't already know the value that it was going to provide to them. And
yeah,
so that helps us dramatically in my industry specifically is leveraging our Siemens account partners to be able to help us get that upfront homework done, but then
mm,
also to understand the contracting process within inside of the organization. So that's very helpful to
yeah.
my team.
And being in such a kind of, regulated space, do you feel as soon as you've got some use cases, it helps other kind of new businesses and other organizations when they see an existing use case for someone else? Has that helped the process for you?
It helps us up front to because a lot of the times the customer, we may bring one use case because we've worked with the Siemens team, and maybe it's an adapt and extend use case to where we're going
Mm,
to adapt a new application to extend a core system of record, be it, one of the main ones, PLM, ERP, or
yeah,
whatever, pick your poison, right? Well, then you get single focused on that application and that value. Oh, this is what Mendix can do. This is all that Mendix can do. But to whereas as you open up the aperture and you follow our process and you go through our workshops, our portfolio workshops, you start to understand that Mendix can be used outside of engineering, outside of manufacturing, outside of traditional Siemens-based industrial customer sets. And this is where you can bring in more of the CIO level
yeah,
conversations into the mix. And so that helps dramatically. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine. And in your 4 years, how have you seen the market evolve? For Mendix, I think year by year, it's getting better known. There's more larger brands, kind of adopting the platform. But from when you started to today, how has that process been for you in regards to, when you're going in, is it easier now because low code is more kind of spoken about, or do you see it's the same because obviously there's always new challenges, back then it was probably what's low code. Now AI is in the mix as well, so how has that kind of 4 year process been for yourself?
It's been a journey for sure, right? Because not only there was a lot of internal training that had to go on as well, being owned, by a European
Yeah.
headquartered organization. A lot of our R&D and everything is also outside of the continental United States. Well, doing business with inside of aerospace and defense, the first question is always, are you using US citizens? Is that who's working on this? Do you have US based support? And so getting the internal organization to see what we were facing in the field. And luckily, we've got a rock star R&D team that actually listens to the field. And
Yeah.
so they were able to interpret the requirements that our customers were saying that our platform didn't have at the time. And so it was really hard at first for us to convince a customer to come on board to a platform to where they couldn't use our commercial cloud because they're like, well, what
Yeah.
are we going to use?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to use Studio Pro. It's amazing. And they're like, well, what about all this cool DevOps stuff? Well,
Yeah.
that's coming in the future, and I just had to place a bet on that. Sure enough, my R&D team delivered,
Yeah.
moving into year 2, into year 3, we had customers now that were onboarded that were actually excited and adopting the platform. So that also excites the internal team as well. And then we created a new product that's specific for regulated industry called our private Mendix platform. And so that's what we're going to market with now. But that was fully built by our customers and
Yeah.
their needs on what they are asking for. And we delivered what they are needing now. And so that's been the toughest part is actually adopting a commercial based technology and making it into an aerospace and defense technology.
Yeah. And it's funny you said that because a lot of your customers that I speak to, they talk about obviously the feedback they've given the Mendix team on things they'd like to see and they appreciate that those things are heard, and they're also kind of adding value to the platform, right? Because
Yeah.
obviously you've got your own team, but then that's like an extension of your team, bringing things to your attention that they may have not thought was necessary now, or and maybe further down the roadmap.
Yeah.
And there's this ongoing discussion of build versus buy, right? So how do you navigate that in your conversations?
Well, we look at more, I have this conversation frequently with customers because we come off that, hey, Mendix can build anything for you. But that's true. There's a build and there's a buy reason in
Yeah,
business. And so the way that I put them to is, look, it's all about knowing what's the appropriate use case to build in low code. We could build an ERP system or a CRM system with Mendix. Would that be the best use of our customers' money and time? Probably not. Go buy Salesforce, go buy
yeah,
SAP, right? Like those are your COTS buy decisions. But your build decisions are, hey, now I bought a COTS based technology. That's only 80% of what I need. Now I need to customize the remaining 20% to actually that's specific to my business. Well, those are build decisions. Those are custom build decisions that are your specific intellectual property that's going to drive your competitive differentiation of the next person using SAP or the next person using Salesforce. And so that's the way that I have that conversation. You're always going to have buying of COTS technology, and you're always going to have building of new technology. And so it's that moment and understanding how you select the highest value applications to be built in low code versus the highest value COTS systems that you need to go purchase from a vendor. And so
yeah,
those are the conversation points that we typically have.
yeah. And sales processes in themselves are pretty long, in these kind of when you're
Very
dealing
long.
with these customers. But then when you add, these the industry you're in, there's a lot of red tape, a lot of red tape, a lot of things you need to kind of get through. What's been your approach to managing these long cycles, working through, multiple layers of compliance?
Of like internal management because yeah,
Yeah.
because we have quotas too we have to meet, right? So again, that was a lot of at the beginning, it was a lot of, hey, by the way, we don't live in a 6-month sales process here,
Yeah.
right? We live in a 24 to 36-month sales
Wow.
process to where we have to create the requirements. We have to, create the business benefits. And so at the beginning, it was hard because there was no revenue coming in for this specific industry.
Mm,
But then whenever you see the size of the revenue that does come in once you land one of these large contracts, then everybody gets it. They're like, oh, you're building up for that,
yeah.
right? And so the compliance and regulations are all part of that sales process. Again, the government's just not going to trust your word. They're going to
Yeah.
verify that your technology meets these cybersecurity standards provided by NIST. And so, depending on the type of data that you're going to be dealing with, you're going to be dealing at different classifications of those NIST standards. And so, just saying that, oh, yeah, we can do that, we've got an ATO or an authority to operate over in the Air Force. Well, the Navy says, so what? You don't have one
Yeah.
for us. And so you have to get
Wow.
one for us now, and that's the same thing with dealing with large defense industrial based organizations. Well, their customers are the military. And so they
Yeah.
also have to abide by those same standards. And so the good thing is once you can get customers talking to customers, that the ease sets in with them, right? They're not listening to a vendor at that point saying, oh, yeah, we can get an ATO. That's no problem. They hear that every day and they start a multi-million-dollar, process to get an authority to operate on a technology. And then that company goes out of business,
Wow.
and it's the government's out all of that money and all of that
Yeah.
processing, right? So they have to have validation up front that you can meet the requirements and allowing them to have other conversations like at our Realize Live event or other large events to where we can bring customers together to actually
Yeah.
have conversations one-on-one. That's really been a huge driving factor for us expanding in the industry is now that we have customers comfortable enough to talk to other customers to say that, look, Mendix actually is real and they actually
Yeah.
can achieve these security levels. They've done that for us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And talking about these, really long sales cycles, can you talk me through, a major win you've had, after going through one of these cycles that, has been really complex, but at the same time, really rewarding?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a large aerospace manufacturer that, that's been a long process with them. They originally started in a closed program environment, which means that it was only a Windows based architecture or a Linux based architecture. There was no cloud technologies even in that environment. And so we couldn't even go in the environment. So the challenge was, how do we train these resources that were like aerospace engineers and stuff, to be Mendix developers?
Yeah.
And so the challenge was, how do we do that? The rewarding part was, they were really excited to upskill themselves. And so we got to spend a lot of time with them, outside of their closed environment and open office space, taking them through workshops, taking them through our training, our rapid application delivery training, working with them through office hours on non-proprietary based use cases, allowed us to initially seed in 100 users, which is, a smaller deal for us,
Yeah.
right? But the goal wasn't so much of, hey, we're going to have this big deal. It was, hey, how do we build momentum in
Mm,
the organization? And the only way to do that is by building these valued resources that understand how to develop on our platform, because they're the ones that are going to be delivering the value. We're not going to be in control of that. So it's fast forward a year and a half after that, the team has delivered 4 or 5 applications into the
wow.
closed program. Now you have other closed programs saying, well, how did you do that? How did you do that? And so it started to grow naturally with inside of those environments. And that eventually got up to more of the C levels inside of the
Mm,
organization saying, hey, what's going on over there? And then, 3.5 years go by and we're able to lock in a substantial, order, with our Siemens help, our account team's help. We're on the precipice now of, doing enterprise license discussions with this
wow.
customer. And it's very, very rewarding, because not only are they building systems that support our warfighters, they're also now looking at, hey, how do we extend our SAP system? How do we use this for legacy modernization across other open programs? And so it's very rewarding whenever you get a customer that's willing to put the time in up front, and we are putting the time in and the dedication, and that actually you see fruit, from that
Yeah.
tree. It's very, very rewarding, not just to me, but the actual technical folks that put in all of the hard work.
Mm,
They get to see it,
yeah.
happen in front of their eyes. And so it's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head where obviously, it's such a long cycle that you're already going through, even though it started small, to see it flourish and grow. That's just, for any person in sales, even the internal other teams as well. But even for you to show that, you kind of putting in the work. Yes, one breaking the door to get in is a good start, but then that growing to now be where it is. There's a piece of satisfaction there as well.
Yeah. And I measure, we're successful whenever the customer tells us we have a Mendix first approach. You have to prove to me why you're not using Mendix to develop that application. Then we know that we have success.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And in the deals that you've kind of worked on, has there been any deals that you felt, okay, this isn't going the way we want it to go? It's not looking positive, but somehow something in the conversation has turned it to
Yeah.
make them sign with Mendix. Can you talk me through a scenario like that?
Yeah. So it's another very large international aerospace organization. They did an RFP approach. And that's, those are tough for us, because it's really, they're throwing it out to industry at that point. So
Yeah,
we're going to be competing. It's going to be a tough competition, because there are other great, vendors out there that can
yeah.
do, sort of what we do. But at the end of the day, they wanted to do a self-assessment of our platform without any of our help. They said, well, if it's so easy to use, we're going to take the
Wow,
next year and we're going to learn your platform and your competitors' platforms. And then we're going to technically grade those platforms at the end of that year. And I'm like,
wow.
like this is, so we're
Yeah,
sitting a whole year, of,
yeah,
just every like other week talking to the customer, just saying, hey, how's it going? It's going well. We're deploying the other competitors' platform right now.
yeah,
It used to be, I'm like, oh, I wonder what platform that is,
yeah,
like, how can I seed in my
yeah, yeah,
competitive differentiations right now, But they kept it so closed. And then we get to the end of the evaluation period, and they come back to us and they're like, hey, So you guys won by 1 point. And I'm
Wow.
like, 1 point? And they're like, yeah, but that's just on the technology. Now we have to go into the financial justification. And so I'm like, oh, I'm like, here we go. So here comes the discounting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I didn't even get to provide my value selling approach to this
Yeah.
customer to prove like we shouldn't be discounting our platform.
Yeah.
It delivers enough value not to discount. But I know that some of my competitors are willing to discount very deeply to seed a deal, whereas that's not the approach that we typically take. And so we got through negotiations and he said, well, you guys are matched at price. So I
Okay.
have to give these two competitors now to my procurement team. And I'm like,
Okay.
now what's procurement going to say?
Yeah.
How are they going to look at this? But luckily we had that feather in the back of our cap being owned by Siemens, and the
Mm.
procurement lead reaches out to me. He's like, it's a no brainer for me. It's either
Oh,
onboard a
nice.
new vendor or just go with the vendor that we already trust with Siemens.
Yeah.
And so boom, we got the order like two
Wow.
weeks later.
Wow.
So
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah,
that's
it's
why I don't
interesting
have
because
any hair
obviously,
anymore.
yeah,
Yes.
but it's interesting because obviously all the playbooks go out the door, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
they've just kind of shut you out and they're doing everything themselves. But that shows obviously the power of the platform was enough to get it. Obviously, the Siemens brand helps,
Yeah.
but still they evaluated it themselves for a long time. So yeah, that's a really, really cool story actually.
Yeah.
And obviously now I assume a lot of your days are talking about the big topic, generative AI, everyone's
Every
talking
day.
about it. People don't really know what they want to do about it, but what they're going to do with it, but they're still talking about it. How has that influenced how you're positioning Mendix with so many other, native AI tools also coming out?
Yeah. And luckily, again, I have to give thanks and big kudos to my team, like the larger team, the competitive team, the R&D team that are really forward thinking because they saw this happening, right? And so they prepared our platform for this conversion. I would actually not call it, I would call this a revolution in software development. I get asked constantly by C-level executives, well, why do we even need Mendix anymore? We have
Mm,
these other Gen AI. Like I can go develop an application now. I can get it to write me Java. I can get it to write me do this and build an application for me. Like I don't understand why we need platforms now. And so it's always about, all right, well, let's bring in your InfoSec team and let's talk that through with them and see what they think about people using generative AI to develop applications that are going to access your corporate data, right? You have to have governance, you have to have the control, you have to have the policies. And so that's why you need a platform. And so once we get them over that, all right, we understand we need a platform, then we move into more of the Gartner's approach on this to where if we didn't have low code today and we just had full stack development with Gen AI, if we didn't have low code connected to Gen AI today, I should say, full stack with Gen AI is more powerful than low code for sure. But whenever you bring in Gen AI to the low code platform, it far outpaces full stack with Gen AI because now you're dealing in visual based model driven approach versus a coding based approach. And you can invite much more people into the software development lifecycle to be able to use that Gen AI tool to help them generate those low code models to build applications. And so I think that it's going to be in 2 years from now, I'm going to have like a Jarvis on my laptop and I can just say, hey, Jarvis, spin me up a Mendix application, deploy it out to my Android or my iOS device, that's how I mean, I just see what my R&D team is doing right now. And I'm like, what are you guys going to do next? Right. We're
yeah.
already auto generating domain models, auto generating pages. I just think that that's the sky's the limit on where this is going to go, especially as agentic AI starts to take shape
Yeah.
in the industry.
And on the customer side, what's the kind of feedback from them when you're, showing them all the capabilities? There's I think maybe a year ago or 2 years ago even, obviously a lot of businesses were slowing down. You're already in a slow process of, making a decision. AI has come in the mix, slowed down a lot of conversations. Have you felt for you personally nothing's changed where people are still, just going at the speed that you're used to, or has because the uncertainty around, Gen AI, have things slowed down more?
Yeah, I think Gen AI has shined a much brighter light on just AI in general. AI has been around for a long time, and this Gen AI was like a hyper, you know,
Yeah.
focus on AI, but that's really just on the generative portion. And so it's allowed the organization to see, hey, we actually have been building machine learning models for a long time. We've actually been doing what else can we do with the stuff that we've already developed? And then let's figure out what we're going to do with this generative AI stuff. We're seeing some of our customers now, just to be completely honest, most of the defense industrial base and the DoD right now are still looking at Gen AI saying, we're not sure about where that fits inside of our market yet. There are low hanging fruit areas for manual paper processing, such as reviewing of RFPs or RFQs that are coming in, being able to use generative AI to be able to question a document. All of that is being used today, and our customers are using some Mendix to drive that today. But we see where the real power is going to come from is whenever we can get our customers to get Gen AI approved for their manufacturing and engineering networks, because now we can start tying all of this data together, especially with our acquisition of Altair, to be able to push all that data into a graph database and then put Mendix on top of an analytics layer to be able to drive insights from that graph database across the entire organization data chain. That's where the customers in my industry are really going to see the value on where they're going to be able to get more competitive, the price of their products that they sell to the government down because they're able to increase efficiency so much. And at being a taxpayer, I like that, right? That we're
Yeah.
paying less money for our systems that protect our country.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And in sales, it's continuous learning. You can always be learning something, right? No matter how many years experience you have. What's one of the best lessons you've learned from a deal that didn't close, especially in the space you're in, that's helped you be a better seller.
Yeah. Yeah. Understanding the contract process. Uh, that is, learn that early on in my career to where we had funding, everything all set aside, but we forgot certain areas of the contracting process that we were out of compliance with. And so we were all full. The customer even thought we were going to get the award, everything. It gets to the contracting office and they're like, oh, no, we can't award this. And boom, just
Wow.
red lines it right out the door. You're like, it's like 3 years of work and you're just going to
Yeah, wow.
turn it down like that. Like, we're like, yeah, well, we've got a competitive bid. We're going to go with the competitive bid. And like, if I would have done enough homework on that
Yeah,
process to realize that those compliance documents had to be in, and it was a no, like either you submitted them or you didn't. And if you didn't,
yeah,
you were out of compliance. That was a huge, huge blow to my ego, put it that
yeah,
way. And
yeah.
it was a major learning point in my career.
Yeah. And I think it's all those things that help, improve people, right? It's all those things that in the next process, okay, these are the things that I've done wrong in the past. And it just helps you get better and better, right? It's one of those, it's how you deal with those experiences. It's obviously you take the loss, but then you use it in a positive way going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we've inside of Mendix, we've done a really good job, or the leadership's done a good job at structuring our sales process so we can mitigate risk like that. So now we have what's called a mutual action plan that we do with our customers whenever we get close to the deal closing, that there's responsibility on both sides. We're partnering with you here. We're not just a vendor. We're your
Yeah.
partner. So we both want this to work. So let's be honest with each other. Let's identify the exact next steps that have to happen, who owns that next step, and who ultimately is going to put their signature on the paper. Are they on vacation this week? Are they on
Mm,
vacation next week? We've got to get this deal in 3 weeks. So are we all aligned, with everybody's schedule? And are they expecting this to hit their desk at a certain time? So now we are mapping directly to time the process to make sure that we can mitigate risk like that.
yeah. Yeah. And, I think there'd be other generations of people who, like you as a kid had a real interest in this industry who, looking to pursue a career in software sales within the similar industry. What advice would you give to someone starting out in low code sales, who are looking to kind of focus on, public sector industries?
Yeah. Know your technology. Don't count on others to know it for you. I have a solution architect. I look at him as my right side of my brain. We go everywhere together, but there's times to where I don't have him next to me. Maybe I'm in an airport. Maybe I'm at a show or an event to where I
Mm,
wasn't really planning to demonstrate anything, but hey, there's the customer. Now's my time to shine. It's to know your technology. So I know our platform in and out. I make sure I understand the guts, the architecture of our platform so much. I can't implement it for you, but I
Yeah.
know what it takes to implement it. I know the technologies that it takes to implement it. And just having that level of commitment to the technology and the architecture and the understanding of what questions the customer really wants answered, not having to depend on someone else to answer those really shows value to that customer that you're talking to, that they're talking to an expert. Customers want to deal with experts. And so become an expert on your platform. That's my advice to be successful.
And, what do you think separates, high performing, consistent salespeople from the rest? Especially, I think in your situation, it's much longer, these processes, right? So there can be a lot of frustration of waiting. You might have multiple things. Your pipeline might look great, but obviously they're all taking so long, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you think separates, someone who can consistently perform?
Understanding that sales is a contact sport. People buy from people, and we hear that all the time being pushed into our brains from our senior leadership. And I've heard that my whole career. You can make a sale over a call like we're doing right now, but you're never going to create a partnership with the customer virtually. You have to get out there. You have to meet them. You have to move into uncomfortable areas, step outside of your comfort zone to realize that sales is a contact sport, especially whenever you're selling enterprise software. You have to get out there and you have to push the bounds of your comfortability to be able to show the customer that you care enough that you'll take that 6-hour flight to meet them in their office, right? Versus having them, take a virtual call over a Teams
Yeah.
meeting or something like that. So that's really where I've seen over my career where you separate the really successful sellers from the ones that are just trying to make it is the ones that have the biggest expense bill on their Amex typically are bringing in the revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And funny you said that because I'm interested to know, before the pandemic, it was very less Teams calls, Zoom calls, right? It
Yeah.
was just the norm. Like you said, the credit card bills are probably through the roof because face to face was just the way, right? Where I think even a lot of customers now, like end businesses, they're working from home. They're fully remote. They're not really going to an office. How has that shift been for you who before the pandemic, obviously probably you're used to a lot more face-to-face interaction versus now where it's a bit more, I think some people also just prefer the virtual thing. So it's about forcing them to meet you sometimes, how has that been for you? Do you feel like it's been a bit of a transition or you've kind of been able to deal with it quite easily?
So, I mean, what was very uneasy to me is making the transition from being an outside seller, but then COVID happened and me having to be a
Yeah.
virtual seller.
Yeah.
That was the toughest part because you still have quotas to meet.
Yeah.
You still have to make sales. So that
Yeah.
was really tough for me. So transitioning back out and going to meet with people, that was the easy part. But you are still dealing with customers that have a virtual based model.
Yeah.
And so getting enough excitement that you can say, hey, let's fly people in from Seattle and Mesa to come
Mm,
meet in, Orlando. Well,
mm,
that's a big expense for that organization. So
yeah.
you have to create the value to make it worth their time to be able to go out and meet with you. So that's been challenging. But again, we found out creative ways that we can get around that by doing, more road shows by saying,
Yeah.
hey, we'll come to your local office
Mm,
and meet you there, or we'll have an event, to
yeah.
where we can invite multiple different customers into that
Mm,
event. If it's going to a professional sports game or something like that, just to get the customers out of their houses or out of their offices so we can get them more into a social environment to make that human connection. And so that's been a challenge, but I think we're over that now. I think everybody's
yeah.
almost back to normal in my industry. The good thing about my industry is you can't build aircraft virtually, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, that's true. Exactly. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, yeah. But I think what also is good is obviously, with face to face, it's very much, virtually there's only so much of a connection you can build with the customer, right? Where kind of face to face, you can really kind of build that personal connection as well. You can, speak a bit more outside of business and get to know them a
Yeah.
bit well, where rather when it's like this, it might be an hour slot and you've got to get as much crammed into that time as
Yeah.
possible.
I mean, we're all people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like we thrive on relationships.
Yeah.
And so just talking about business all the time isn't creating a relationship. It's
No.
creating a vendor, customer relationship. Whereas if you really want to get to know somebody, you have to get them out of their business, go out to dinner with them, take them to lunch, get a coffee, those types of things. Cause you can ask them personal questions at that point,
Yeah.
and that's, expanding your comfort zone there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, finally, looking ahead, what are you most excited about, for the future of Mendix, specifically in the space you're targeting?
I'm most excited about the fact that we've got a secure customer base right now as a foundation and that we're now in scale mode. I believe that we've built a brand inside of aerospace and defense that is well recognized now. And so we're not having to convince people on who Mendix is anymore. It's more or less, hey, okay, well, show us what you can do for us. We've heard, from this customer or that
Yeah.
customer, what you've done for them. But I think that just the growth potential that my specific vertical has right now, and the fact that our customers are starting to look at Gen AI, even though it'll take them another 2 years to fully adopt it, that's normal to us. And we
Yeah.
can be a part of that change agent with them. And so being at the ground floor of a new groundbreaking technology like this and being a market leader from a technology perspective and low code really helps us like partner with organizations to help them build their agentic AI strategy,
Yeah.
and to be a part of that, not just as a vendor, but also as a thought leader as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Roman, and sharing, your journey,
Sure.
your insights and talking about, the industry you're working in, which is, a real kind of interesting one. And, shout out to Peter for, making it happen. So, I had to mention his name.
Yeah.
But I look forward to kind of, watching, what else is happening with you and,
Yeah.
Mendix and keeping in touch.
Yeah, and if I appreciate the time too, Feroz. And if you look, Peter is an example of a perfect partner and a customer, right? He's very vocal. He tells us what he likes, what he doesn't like. We take that back to our team, and they're like, "Well, we can fix that." He's
Yeah.
very vocal in our community inside. We have a pioneers community, but he also holds our feet to the coals as well, saying, "Hey, we need this. You guys need to
Yeah.
deliver on this, right?" But us having a great personal relationship also allows us to have those frank
Yeah.
conversations,
Yeah.
right? And so there's no uncomfortability there. So I would say that Peter and just the whole General Atomics organization, we thank them for being a customer and speaking about their great experience with us, but we really appreciate the partnership that we have with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, no, thank you. Thank you again, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and then hopefully working together a bit more.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Roman.